We're here in Cologne at Gamescom 2024, and I'm joined by Dave, who's just been playing the latest management sim, stamina management sim that is, the First Berserker Kazan.
That's right. You know, when I think of a Berserker, it's like craze, attack, attack, attack. In the early hours of the game, at least, what we played, doesn't really feel that way.
Yeah, so we played, well, actually you played 30 minutes?
30 to 45 minutes, yeah.
And assuming that this follows the trend of any of these kind of like Souls, Sekiro-likes, that is a tiny, tiny fraction of a game to play. But you played basically the opening of the game and then had a go at a later game boss.
Yes.
And based on me watching over your shoulder, filming some with your face as you died over and over again, it's hitting a lot of the classic Souls notes.
Yeah, everyone sort of knows what Souls-like is now. Die, revive, try again, pick up your souls. You know.
Well, there's checkpoints that you activate, you pick up gear, there are like lore notes to help you learn about the world.
You level up at the not bonfire. The foundation of it is very familiar Souls-like. The way it differentiates itself is, well, the combat and how it's not only your own stamina that you have to manage, you're also working around enemy stamina, which is an interesting wrinkle, and it does change up the gameplay, I think, sufficiently enough that it is worth a look.
Similar to something like Sekiro, enemies have a health bar and they also have what at first looks like a poise bar, but actually what you're seeing is their stamina bar, so their equivalent of what you might have in Elden Ring or Bloodborne or whatever. And you can see that visualized on the enemies, which is not something that typically you see. But what that means is obviously you can kind of manage their stamina in the same way that you're managing your own. So you can kind of lure them into attacking, knowing that they're gonna deplete some of their stamina. And obviously, when their stamina is depleted completely, that opens them up to like critical attacks.
Yeah, I think it was called Shock. And it feels like the main aim in the combat is to get your enemy into a level of exhaustion. Because the light attacks didn't really seem to do a lot of damage. They're more there to interrupt an attack or to stop the enemy's stamina from replenishing. So you're like cutting off that replenishment. The heavy attacks are sort of where the main source of damage is going to come from, as well as, again, depleting the stamina. But it was interesting because I got into a few fights where I was, swinging, depleting my stamina, attacking, blocking, dodging, depleting my stamina. But as they were swinging, as the archers were firing bows and arrows, as enemies were charging up attacks themselves, their stamina became depleted. So it sort of made me think about how like a lightweight boxer might fight a heavyweight, exhaust them, make them tired and then come in for an attack on the flank or, wear them down that way. But again, it doesn't really fit in with the whole Berserker thing. But it was interesting, the stamina management is a thing in Souls-like that you really have to consider. I've never had to consider how tired the enemy is before. And it did create interesting scenarios where I was like, well, I've only got a little bit of stamina left, but so have they. So it's a risk-reward of, do I push myself a little bit, try and land that extra hit, knowing that they'll get knocked into a vulnerable position for a heavy attack. But if I miss and they hit me, I get knocked and I'm stunned and I can get like a really heavy attack. So it really plays on that risk-reward quite well. That is where the combat, I think, really shines, or their specific combat loop really shines. I do think, this is a game that wants to give you the power fantasy. I mean, it's a Souls-like with like anime-inspired elements. Like those two things scream power fantasy. And as well, like the stature of the character, the weapons they immediately get. It's like one giant sword, a huge axe, and you're lumbering through them with these huge swings. I think they are aiming for that power fantasy, especially later in the game when, I was using some of these abilities and compared to the start where it was just a few lumbering swings, I was all of a sudden pirouetting through the sky like a Beyblade, hitting people with every sort of 360 turn. And again, that's the sort of thing that games of this nature do. You start out fairly grounded and then it is the craziness of 86,000 damage and mad Beyblade spins, which there's nothing wrong with that. But again, like that stuff feels more like the Berserker. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how the game takes you from the start to earning its title, almost. But the thing that stood out to me most was that back and forth stamina, exhaustion combat. Like, you're sort of egging each other on as be like, I'm not tired, you're tired. Like you're just holding on that little bit longer than the person opposite you. And I think that is really interesting. And I think that's going to be the main thing that sets it apart from games like Sekiro, a game which, you know, definitely inspired this. Without a doubt. It leans so heavily on perfect dodges and parries. Like, it does the thing, you block, you take stamina. So again, because stamina is way more important than I think a lot of other Souls-likes, it becomes much more consideration. So you're going for that perfect block so you don't lose stamina. Because that again, if you manage to hit those perfect dodges and blocks, you either get some stamina back or the stamina loss is reduced. So for the people that like that really sort of knife-edge gameplay of Sekiro, where you like want to time everything perfectly and be rewarded for that, again, I think this could be an interesting look for those people.
Well, Dave, if people want to know more about the First Berserker Kazan, where should they go?
GameSpot.com.
We'll have more from Gamescom coming up. Bye.